We met in survival mode. I was born there in a condemned house at 804 Lawrence Road. It was an old A-frame house with a rickety porch and loose wooden boards. You had to watch your step as you walked up to the front porch. And there was a storm door with no glass. I remember that because I'm the one that closed it so hard one day that the glass literally fell out of the frame onto the porch. It shattered everywhere. And when you walked inside, there was a den to the right, and straight ahead was the kitchen. And to the left was a staircase. And upstairs there were three bedrooms. And there was only one bathroom in the house. It was at the top of the stairs to the left, and there was no running water in the bathroom. And there actually was a hole where you could see from the bathroom down into the kitchen. And the kitchen is where we had to carry water from to fill the tub to take baths. And the toilet didn't flush. I was 5 when we left there, and fear came too. And fear feels like lack of abundant resources, like love. My parents told us they loved us every day, and my mom tucked me in at night and she would kiss me. And I remember her working really hard, and I remember my dad barely working, and I remember my parents arguing a lot. And from the top of the stairs, I'd hear yelling and curse words. And one time, the sound of glass shattering, and my mom was furiously angry and probably exhausted from a long day, and my dad just seemed confused. And my mom had a sharp tongue and nose, and any conversation that started with, "Have you been drinking?" didn't end well. And they always said they loved each other. And I wondered, is this the way love goes? And fear feels like scarcity. 2 days before Christmas, we left our tree on our front porch. And while we were away, a neighbor came and dragged our tree from our porch, down the steps, through the yard, across the street, up the hill, into their front door. And we knew this because we lived in Ohio, and all the Christmases were white in the 80s. And all we had to do was follow the path in the snow. And I remember my parents arguing about letting the neighbors keep our tree. And we couldn't afford another one. And my mom worked really hard to get it. But my dad seemed to think that because they stole it from us, they must have needed it more. I'm pretty sure my mom would have killed my dad that night had he not gone and got our tree. And it led me to think, is there enough? They divorced when I was 7. And fear feels like lack of acceptance. We moved into a subsidized duplex in a middle-class neighborhood. It was brand new. It had carpet and 2.5 bathrooms with working plumbing and no holes in the floor. I thought we were rich, but really my mom had just gotten a better job. And over the course of a couple of years, we didn't have extra, but we had enough. And she worked really hard during the day, and she went to school at night. And I remember there was a little white boy who was in my grade, and he lived 2 doors down. And I always felt bad for him because he was generally dirty. And I remember his mom was on drugs, and sometimes they didn't have food. And we rode the bus together every day. And he was a little manic, and sometimes he would get angry. And when he got angry, he would call us niggers, which meant when we got off the bus, we had to beat his ass, because the way I was raised, you don't let nobody call you a nigger. And fear feels like darkness when there's room for everyone to shine. 500 miles down a road less traveled, I too went to boarding school when I was 15. And the first time I had ever been to Asheville was the day I moved there. I was one of 3 at the time, 4 Black girls in a Southern privileged mountainous bubble, determined to try to create opportunities for myself. And I graduated from Asheville School with high honors and almost every academic and leadership award the school issued, plus a Moorhead scholarship to Carolina. And there was one of my friends, he was a white guy, he was in my classes, he sat next to me in AP Calculus. He was my AP Chemistry partner, lab partner. I had worked with him more closely than anyone else. Over the 3 years that I was there, we worked together in almost every class. And when I won the Moorhead and he didn't, he reminded me that I hadn't earned it, but that it had been given to me because I'm Black. No one ever called me a nigger at Asheville School, but I was reminded that even friends saw me as one, especially when I earned something that was meant for them. And fear feels like starvation in the midst of a feast. My dad was a Baptist minister, and he was a gifted orator. His sermons always connected with people. He loved God, and he knew the Bible, and we spent a lot of time at church. I went to summer camp at church. My stepmom was the secretary at the church, and my dad, Monday through Friday, was the janitor at the church. But on Wednesday nights and Sundays, he was Reverend Smith. And Reverend Smith ran Bible studies on Wednesdays and preached one Sunday a month in this beautiful Grand Baptist church with a charismatic Black pastor and a gospel choir that could sing, not sing, sang. And what really amazed me about this church was that it had an elevator. And on the second floor, my dad had an office, and it was always pristine. Everything was in its place. He had a big wooden desk, and all of his plaques were properly aligned, and his pens, and all of his Bibles with his name inscribed in cursive. And his office had a big arched window that would allow the room to flood with light. And I loved to sit in that window. And at home, we talked a lot. I loved talking to my dad. He told me so many stories about himself and his life and my mom and our family and the Bible. And it really annoyed me when he would do this drunk, because the talks turned into arguments, and that happened a lot. And fear is getting drunk off things that don't fill us. He was 21 when I died. Just kidding. I was 21 when he died. And that's when I learned that striving and achieving aren't the same as living. And that's when I started being afraid to live. And for a long time, I felt fearful and alone and existed in this familiar state of unrest. And I'd ask myself, how can I survive here? And at the same time, I remained fully operational. I graduated from Carolina. I went to Duke, I got an MBA. I worked for a big company. I was trying to find really every way I could to find comfort and stability. And even when I'm calm, fear has a way of creeping in to my thoughts and causing me to ask myself, how have I smushed my creative brain into this conservative corporate mold? And it's because these corporate handcuffs keep me comfortably 500 miles from 804 Lawrence Road. And fear is not wanting to be married because the forever part seems daunting. Does celebrating a lifetime of marriage mean it's been good? I've seen it done, but the process doesn't look appealing. And our therapist says, you don't have to worry about forever. Just wake up every day and choose each other. Why do people push marriage when their eyes say they're not happily married? I've learned that happiness is is just a practice, and marriage isn't for everyone. But my dad was a family man, and I knew that marriage would make him proud. And I am fortunate to be married to a patient and kind man who is an exceptional father to our 3 kids. And we live a suburban life designed for them. And sometimes I lay awake in panic. I am rarely alone and often lonely. And I ask myself, am I good enough to do this? And sometimes I sob, I'm not enough to do this. So, as you can tell, Fear and I have spent a lot of time together, real and imagined, and sometimes paralyzed by indecision, and more often in full motion. Fear and I are together 40 years strong. And people say, don't be afraid. I'm not sure I've ever done anything and not been afraid. There must be something wrong with me. My dad would say I need to pray, but I wish he would have known that some things you can't just pray away. And about 10 years ago, I was so tired of being hijacked by my feelings and circumstances that I found a therapist. And I started practicing mindfulness. And as it turns out, I'm as abnormal as anybody else, but I'm learning how to be aware of things happening around me. And I learned how to identify my feelings and name them. And it's a powerful practice to be able to sit with your emotions and let yourself go through the process of feeling them without judgment or trying to hide them or wish your feelings away. And I'm comfortable being uncomfortably vulnerable. And I begin to notice how fear shows up, rarely announcing itself, always just simmering in the background, disguised as this thing or that. And so instead of don't be afraid, I say, you're afraid. Me too. Do the things you're afraid to do. And I practice challenging myself to do new things, and I'm slow to start. And I put myself after my husband and my kids and my job, which means a lot of nights I fall asleep during nightly meditations with my 3-year-old. And I wake up in the middle of the night in time to eat dessert and go back to sleep. But I like to work out and read, and I should mention I'm a writer. I write things, but mostly journals and goals and memories and ramblings, extra emotional stuff that I tend to only share with myself. And I have 19 years of journals. And I love to look back and notice how many goals came to be over time. And I remember my dad and I planned to write a book of poetry, but I've been afraid to start without him. And so as a first step, last year, I started writing daily affirmations, and some of them are small and some of them are big. But I write them when I journal to remind me of how I see myself and what's important to me. And so one of them is I'm a New York Times bestselling author and public speaker. And sometimes I feel energized when I write that, and sometimes I feel ashamed. Because you gotta write if you want to be a writer, honey. That's my inner voice, but fear keeps her quiet. But the beauty of affirmations is by asking, the universe brings opportunities my way to do these things, and reminders from encouragers to just say yes, to simply begin. So here I am today. This is me taking just one step in fear and sharing it with you. Do the things you are afraid to do. Thank you.